Hi there. RevOps as a team is still very new. RevOps gets talked about as this solve all. One of the things that you need to understand is that there is no one version of RevOps. RevOps needs to change as your organization changes. What does it look like to build your RevOps team at different business levels? Doug and Jess lay out the details of RevOps' job function and how to start putting together your team here on the RevOps Show.
Jess, you look loaded for bear today.
I look what?
Loaded for bear.
Loaded for bear?
You're not familiar with that term?
I am not familiar with that.
Like you are
no.
ready. You look like you are ready to attack.
Loaded for bear. Wow. That's a new one.
I've never used that before.
No.
Loaded for bear. Informal, North American, fully prepared for any eventuality, especially a confrontation or challenge.
I was today years old when I learned this term.
To play on the big stage that is New York, you'd better come loaded for bear.
Wow.
But I think that accurately describes it, right? You are fully prepared for any eventuality, especially a confrontation or challenge.
I don't know if that's how I feel today, but sure.
I don't mean today. I mean just like for this episode. That's what you look like. I mean, your face was like, you were like,
okay.
I was like, holy! I went up to greet you, and I was like, oh wait,
Well, now I'm totally like thrown off because you didn't greet me in the normal way, and I threw a new term at me. So we're off to a great start.
So maybe you're not loaded for bear. Apparently, you were not prepared for any eventuality.
Apparently not.
Apparently, you were focused on efficiency rather than resilience and flexibility.
Well, would we expect any less? Is the question.
I'm just like, I have that shirt, Jess. Did you steal that shirt from me?
I did not steal this shirt from you. I bought it myself.
Did you really? Did you?
I did.
Did you buy it? They came to San Antonio, right?
They came to San Antonio. I've not seen it in New York. I wish maybe one day.
You know what they say, Jess?
What, Doug?
When you wish upon a star.
Oh, there we go.
Makes no difference who you are.
Just going to quote the whole thing. That is what they say.
12 days, Jess. 12 days.
I know. I'm so excited.
How excited are you to see me?
To see you? I'm excited.
Yeah. Wait, that's not the main thing you're excited about?
Probably more excited to see Mickey Mouse, but you know.
Well, people say I run a Mickey Mouse operation.
Do they? Wow.
This is actually a special year for you now, isn't it?
Why do you say that? I mean, it's a special year for a number of reasons, but I don't know where we're going.
You're going to have 2 Disney visits this year.
I'm not going to have 2 Disney visits this year.
Oh, I thought you were going to Disneyland in October.
We were. That got pushed, so we're not doing that now. That got pushed, by the way, before end of year. So, yeah.
Now I'm sad for you.
I'm very sad for me. That was going to be like my big birthday celebration.
So this is kind of like making up for...
Sure. Yeah.
Should we bring a birthday cake?
No, we should not. We absolutely should not do that.
Why not?
My birthday is not for 6 months, so 7 months.
Yeah, but you were so looking forward to being at Disney for your birthday.
I was. We don't need to do all that though. Really, it's fine.
You know what? When we're at dinner, I'll tell the servers that it's your birthday.
Great. I'm sure you will. I have no doubts that that's going to happen.
All right, Jess, you told me to keep the small talk to a minimum because you said you got a loaded topic today. So what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about the people of RevOps. Doug?
Well, my philosophy, just to get started, is that people are people. Or do they need people?
People who need people.
Are we going to go down the Depeche Mode? When you come to a fork in the road, do you take Depeche Mode or Barbra Streisand?
Babs.
You go the Babs route, really?
I do, but that's, I mean, I'm a theater lover.
Juan
so
would
there
go
you
Depeche Mode, would he not?
Yeah. There'd be no question.
I think I'd go Depeche Mode just because I think it'd be a more interesting trail.
Probably.
It would be a very, very bizarre trail. Okay, people of RevOps.
Okay, so people of RevOps, yep. You actually wrote a blog post on the changing role of RevOps. So let's start there.
Just in the beginning.
It was a cold and rainy night.
I was going back to the biblical. I was going to, like God said, let there be light.
Oh, wow. Okay. We're going way back. So you talked about in the post about the role of RevOps as you scale. So can you talk me through that a little bit?
You know what the best thing about RevOps is today, Jess?
What?
Do you know what RevOps is? Whatever you want it to be. Right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, am I wrong?
You're not wrong, actually. As I was researching for this episode, I was like, yeah, this is just whatever.
It's like account-based.
Everybody wants it to be.
It's the operations equivalent of account-based marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, what we're going to do is we're going to add RevOps, and right. So the thing that's, I mean, RevOps as a term is still very new.
Yeah.
And actually, I did not intend to do this as part of this was not part of my prep, but I did share this on LinkedIn last night because silos and being siloed is coming back into, like, everyone's talking about that again.
Yeah.
We kind of died down and now we're back up to it. And, you know, your tech stack's getting so big, you've got specialized teams. And what I said was your sprawling tech stack is not causing you to be siloed.
Mm-hmm.
Your silos aren't even the reason that you're siloed. Don't get me wrong, they don't help. But if you were to change that, it wouldn't really do anything. The reason you're siloed is because you're internally focused, you're not focused on the customer. If you focus on the customer, if you are outside in oriented instead of inside out oriented, a whole lot of these issues will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And so RevOps gets talked about as this solve all. Now, granted, I'm in an echo chamber, right? So I turn on LinkedIn and I can't go anywhere without someone saying something about RevOps, and it's, candidly driving me crazy. But, RevOps, I mean, we're still in RevOps hype cycle.
Yeah.
I will still say that RevOps, like, it is still for RevOps to prove its mettle and its worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that you need to understand is that there is no one version of RevOps. RevOps needs to change as your organization changes. Yep. And where you are as an organization provides a great degree of context to what type, if any, RevOps function you should have.
Yep.
And what the focus of your RevOps function should be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think and you hit on this, you talked about high growth, and you talked about degrading and kind of those two different dynamics of the organization. But I really like, and I think you've talked about this on the podcast before, but the example of you being the bench coach. And so if the team was winning, you had to figure out, okay, what's going to happen? What could happen for us to fall behind, and how do we prevent that? And then if you guys were losing, okay, what would happen and what could we do to get ahead? And it's funny that you bring up the focus on the customer, because as I was reading that, I was thinking that's how I deal with our clients. And by the way, that's how I deal with our team dealing with our clients. We talk about red, yellow, green with clients. Yellow means we're in danger of being off track. Red means we're off track. Green means we're on track. And the way that I handled those three, those are the buckets that they go for me. And the way I handle that when I'm doing my weekly check-ins, when I'm dealing with the client, is totally different. Because red is all about, okay, what's the action plan to get us out of this? If we're in green, where are the danger spots for us to get not be in green anymore? And how do we address those?
Yeah, you actually kind of introduce another element into what the blog post was. So for those of you that haven't read the blog post, what are you doing? Hit pause, go to the show notes, click on the link to the blog post, read the blog post, and then come back. So I talk about, I segmented the stages of the business. As a small business, basically less than 20 employees.
Yep.
SMB, 20 to 150. By the way, I'm one of the things I enjoyed about doing this is I finally really sat down and said, okay, how are we going to define the segments? And if anyone's wondering, why did I choose 150 or why did we choose 150? There's a lot of behavioral research on the idea of Dunbar's number. So it's not like you're an SMB at employee 150 and now you're not at 151. But as a general rule, so SMB. Then I talked about a high growth business. We define a high growth business as a company that's doing more than $1 million with an average growth rate. Average growth rate for us is trailing 3 years of 25% or more.
Mm-hmm.
So an SMB would typically have a growth rate of 10 to 25%. So you can be an SMB high growth. And then we have mid-market. So mid-market is basically 151 to 5,000 employees. Here again, you can be a mid-market company. You could be a mid-market high growth company. Then I talk about a degrading company. That is a company that is falling backwards. They've lost their advantage. What you're talking about, you add an element of trouble, not trouble.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. So what you're talking about is a little bit more situational than what the blog post is talking about. So like I would just because you're yellow or even red would not necessarily make you degrading.
Right.
But yeah, so it kind of gets into what does RevOps need to think about when.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just an interesting perspective.
Yep. So let's talk about the jobs of RevOps. We've touched on this before. So like kind of the buckets that come to mind for me are probably the traditional ones that people talk about when they talk about RevOps. So you've got, marketing ops, you've got sales ops, you've got success, and then RevOps's job is to kind of unify those and help with the handoffs between those. Like when we talk about the jobs of RevOps, where does your mind go?
When you're building a RevOps team, when you're building a RevOps function, you've got to hire for various perspectives, for various things. And RevOps hasn't been around long enough for there to be clear maps. Like if I'm growing a marketing team, there's a lot of information out there about, okay, well, if you're this size and you have a marketing team of X, here's how you break down. If you're looking at this, here's how your marketing team breaks down. So I think, you really have to think about what are the roles, like what are the function areas? Because by the way, in the beginning, you're going to hire generalist RevOps people.
Yeah.
But generalist doesn't mean jack of all trades. It like you still want to, like, if the tech stack, which is probably one of the first things that you're going to be looking at and having someone take on a RevOps role, I want them to be a generalist, but I'm anchoring, like, I want them to anchor in like, I'm not going to hire somebody that's equally good at data as a data analyst as a CRM admin. And people are going, well, why not? It would be really good if someone was equally good at both of those, but the reality is they're very different disciplines and and so forth. So I think that when you look at the jobs of a RevOps team, one thing that you have to think about is not only what are the things that they're doing, but there's also kind of, if you're going to hire for RevOps, you have to think about a management perspective. So, like, there's the internal management. If I hire people, then who are those people reporting to? Who's responsible for overseeing that? And I think that, by the way, that's one of the biggest problems in RevOps today. Like, for a company that wants to go RevOps, you can't hire somebody with 15 years of RevOps experience. You can't hire somebody with 10 years of RevOps experience. Now, you can hire somebody with 10 years of experience in doing things that are associated to RevOps. But if you bring in, if you start hiring RevOps people and you say, okay, they're going to report to the VP of sales, that's going to be, that's going to create an experience that's not necessarily the right experience, right? Because I don't know that the VP of sales, A, has the knowledge base to lead a RevOps team, and B, priorities and mindsets. I would say the same thing if you were to have them to report to the VP of marketing, but then you say, okay, well, I'm going to hire a VP of RevOps. Well, one thing is, I would say that there aren't that many VP of RevOps in the world yet, relatively speaking, right?
Right.
But also, don't hire a VP of RevOps if they're your first hire.
Well, and so where I go when you talk about VP of RevOps is how large is your organization too? Because like, and going back to the blog post, you hit on this. If you're a smaller org, like you don't even need RevOps. Like that small business doesn't need it. And SMB, that's where you start maybe looking at it. But we're talking about one person. And for me, for that type of organization, you're talking about a generalist, not necessarily a director, again, depending on the organization, the size, the complexity, but
correct. And we'll get this we'll get to this into the phases. So one rule that I have, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, it's okay to start off hiring one person in a RevOps role. That is okay. Mm-hmm. But if you make the move to hire one person in a RevOps role, you better have a plan to hire at least 3. And I would say you probably need to have that plan to hire at least 3. 12 to 18 months is what I would want to have. 24 months would be the outshot.
Why do you say that you better have a plan to hire at least 3? Is it the discipline thing? Is it the...
So if you think about how RevOps emerges in an organization, it starts off being a piece of a lot of people's jobs.
Yep.
Over time, it becomes a part of a couple, maybe a few people's jobs.
Yep.
And then you begin to hire people for that. So the question is not, do you have RevOps? Do you not have RevOps? Again, even a small company, less than 20 employees, that we say RevOps isn't, there's still a RevOps function. We're just saying you're just not calling out that function.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So the moment I call out and I say, this is a RevOps role, this is RevOps, I've just added a layer of complexity to my company.
Yeah.
Right, so you just added complication. And by the way, in calling that out, that is an internally focused piece. Like, you are looking internally when you do that. And so you've just like, the biggest challenge in SMB, again, roughly 20 to 150 people, is the place where you have to go from being the way you drive results, from being people-driven systems to manage to systems-driven systems to manage. Right. And that's one of the hard things. Like, the moment the moment your sales organization grows, you add an SDR, and all of a sudden you have two different people that are having conversations with a prospect, and one doesn't know what the other one is doing. If you don't have the right system in place to manage that, you create a really bad customer experience. And if you want to know
Yep.
the ramifications of that, just log into LinkedIn and look up for, scroll for a little bit until you see somebody railing against
Yep.
being processed like that. So you're adding complexity. So what's the juice for the squeeze? If I'm going to have one person in a RevOps role, frankly, I probably, it should be a piece of some people's role that's part of something larger. Now, by the time you get to mid-market, by the time you get to mid-market, I think you have to have a RevOps function. By the way, I think that probably happens before you get to 150 employees.
Yeah.
But the other point is, if someone were the RevOps person at a company,
Mm-hmm.
that would suck for them.
Why do you say that?
They have no peer. They're alone.
Yeah. Okay. Got you.
There's some great research. Everyone forgets about like the Gallup research on employee engagement. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what Gallup said is like the number one, or at least one of the number one, like one of the top components about whether or not someone's going to be happy at work, engaged at work?
Is if they have a peer group?
Do they have a best friend at work? Do they have a
Okay.
work best friend?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're the only person in RevOps at a company, you're gonna be isolated. You're gonna create a best friend, which means you're no longer actually in a RevOps focus. You have a RevOps role, and right. So there's just, you don't get the discipline. Hey, everyone's looking on increase force. I'm the decrease friction person.
Right.
By the way, this is true even, and I'm going to talk about outsourcing strategy and leadership in the early stages.
Mm-hmm.
But we have an outsourced team, and we've hired our first RevOps person. Again, I get that's where you have to start.
Right.
Right. But if your plan isn't to get to 3 pretty quickly,
Yeah.
then you'd be better off fully outsourcing that function.
Yep.
And letting the overview of that be a part of somebody else. Right.
Well, and so a little bit of a change of topic to walk back to what you brought up around who they report to. The other thing I wanted to share that I've seen this. So if they report to VP of sales, that's the loudest voice in the room. That's who's going to get to make the decisions for RevOps, right? If they report to marketing, and we've actually seen this specific shift, like for a customer of ours where marketing used to run the RevOps role, and then it shifted to VP of sales, and all of a sudden the focus, what we were working on, what got okayed, shifted. So you got to pay attention to that too as you're building out this role. Like, who do you want driving that? Because whoever their manager is, like, the sales initiatives are gonna win if it's VP of sales. The marketing initiatives are gonna win if it's the VP of marketing.
Yeah, and again, there's an aspect of how we'll balance that when we get into what do different teams look like. So my other point is, like, the management levels, you kind of have your VP, CRO level, Chief Revenue Officer. You have director levels, you have manager levels. The dangerous, like, Jess, you'd be a good director, VP of RevOps.
Okay.
Do you not agree with that?
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, how about, like,
yeah.
Okay, just a manager? Just an associate? But someone would be foolish to hire you as one of the first, certainly as the first. I would say even as the second. Maybe it could begin to make a little bit of sense as the third, but I'd probably say I wouldn't hire you at a corporate side until, like, you would be the 5th person,
right,
in RevOps, right? And here's why. By the way, I would be good as a senior VP, CRO person, etc. But you wouldn't want to hire me for that either, because I'm not going to do this stuff.
Well, right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to get me because why would I go someplace where I had to, like, I was the visionary doer, right? Like I'm going somewhere that's got a big playground,
Right.
right? That's where I'm going.
Right.
The other thing is, and so by the way, I would say that the flaw in hiring you direct
Hmm.
in an early stage is you have all of the executive acumen and the knowledge, but you don't have the strategy creation
Right.
element to kind of initiate that, and that's a very, very expensive. Like, so to hire somebody that has the capability to do that,
Yep.
you don't need that person full time until your RevOps team is 15, 20, 30 people,
Right.
right? So the first thing you got to do is you got to look at, okay, how are they going to be managed? Which leads to one of the ways to go about building a RevOps team is there's a hybrid component to how you build your RevOps team. Now, to what are the jobs of RevOps?
Hmm.
You've got design, true solution design. That's the design thinking, the design management.
Yep.
You've got, the design thinking, the system design. You've got the RevOps element. That's the business analyst element. That's the business process. Not quite at the level of the solution design, of the system design, but there is a RevOps element, which is a business process specialization with a lot of understanding. So like it's about as broad as you get. Because by the way, when you get
Hmm.
to like business analyst is probably the broadest level of expertise with, and there needs to be depth. Because once you start to go above that, you begin to get into the strategic design. You begin into you get into the creation side of RevOps functions and
Yep.
the real strategy side of it, which it's a higher level discipline,
Hmm.
but you begin to narrow your level of focus. Because the individual parts begin to matter less. So the
Right.
business analyst is probably the one who has they used to call that the T-shaped marketer, but it's more like
Yep.
the M-shaped marketer because you go down because it goes broad and it has lots of tentacles going down. I don't know, that's a bad analogy. So
Yep.
then you have and it's interesting. This is where I think a lot of people get lost. You have the database, so the job of managing the database and understanding databases, data structures,
Hmm.
data architecture, which is different than being a data analyst or a data scientist, right? Being a data
Yep.
scientist and being a database expert are, I mean, they they have a lot of cross knowledge, but they're very different, right? So
Yeah.
so data and
Hmm.
analytics.
Yep.
Then you get to tech,
Yep.
managing tech, understanding tech, implementing tech, and within tech you especially have generalist tech,
Yep.
and as you get larger, you're going to have specialist tech, like where they need to know this particular system, right?
Right.
Because we're going
Yep.
deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yep.
Um, Learning and development,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
um, dev, development,
Yep.
creating, um, and increasingly what I'm going to call enablement, what was the burgeoning discipline of sales enablement.
Hmm. Yep.
I think as an I think that tends to start off as being as a role of marketing, and I think as an organization matures, it becomes a role of RevOps.
Yep. There's one job you don't have on here that I'm curious if you think is actually a job of RevOps, which
Well, in
is,
fairness, I was drunk when I put this all together, so it's
oh,
very
great.
possible that I.
So that tracks. That tracks. Um, do you feel
It's
like
yes. When am I
project
not drunk?
accurate?
Building
Um,
building confidence in our community.
yay.
Go.
How do you feel like project management falls into this? Is that for me is a job of RevOps? And I'm curious on your thought.
So it's a job, but so I'm talking about jobs as roles. I think project management is part of your system.
Okay.
I don't think you have the RevOps project manager.
Okay.
By the way, I also think that that's, I mean, there is it in these roles, that probably becomes something that's more of a management element skill that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because project management is, I mean, what in what group would you not need to have project management
You
acumen?
need to have it in every.
I mean, maybe sales,
Yeah.
maybe because they outsourced all the improvements to RevOps. Um, yeah, so I think that's a skill or a
Okay.
knowledge base more than it is a, like. Would you envision having the, well, so we've got our system architect, our project management team.
Yeah, I think if you're big enough, you would have a project management team for it. That's and we're talking on the larger scale, obviously.
You know what my problem with that is?
What?
There was a time that executives didn't type. No, I'm being serious though. I know.
No,
I
I
mean,
know,
I know
I
it
know
was
you
funny,
are.
but
I know you are. I know you are.
because, like, to me, project management,
Hmm.
and there's nobody that loathes project management more than I do.
I'm aware.
Like, I'm like what spies put into project management to poison them. But that should be so, like, by having a project management group,
Hmm.
it feels like Inspector 11 to me. It feels like, well, I'm the system. Oh, well, project management, that's not my job. That's somebody else's job.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. I think that
Okay.
I
So,
I think that's a great point. And for certainly how our philosophy and how we operate, like it is that we don't have a project management team. Everybody's expected to have a level of project management acumen
well,
with what they do.
we do something else. The system and structure that
Yeah.
we have has has project management embedded in it. So, I mean, we enable people, and I know some days it doesn't feel this way. We enable people to, with little to no project management experience, knowledge, or acumen, to project manage. As a matter of fact, probably the biggest thing that we deal with is the tendency, the natural tendency to want to fight the system and the structure that has that inherently built in.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a critical success factor, but I don't think it's a job of. I think
No,
it's
I
embedded
think
in.
it's a good I think it's a good call out because again, I think that frequently gets thought of as a job. I am a project manager, but I agree.
Yeah. So the responsibilities of RevOps are, they're responsible for the database. They're responsible for process design and compliance. They're responsible for the tech stack. They're responsible for data science.
Hmm.
They've got a strategic planning responsibility. They're not solely responsible for strategic planning, but they are.
They have a
Um,
seat at the table.
they have more, like, on the revenue side. They're the ones
Hmm.
who lead strategic planning. Like, as
Yeah.
it matures, they're the ones who should be leading the strategic planning process.
Yep.
By the way, strategy and plan, not the same thing. So strategic planning is not strategy. Um, they've got a learning and development responsibility, an enablement
Yep.
responsibility, territory management and comp, system design, and behavioral science. Like, so that those are their responsibilities. They kind of connect to their roles. So I kind of, when you asked me what the jobs were, I kind of talked about what are the roles of, and
Right.
then the jobs, and then you've
Well,
got, within each of those roles, you have different levels of acumen, capability, experience. So kind of the way I like to think about it is, you kind of go, you start off at an associate level,
Yep.
into an admin level, an analyst level, scientist. I don't think scientist is the right term for everything. So like the equivalent, like I don't say you're a solution design scientist. We'll use the term
No.
architect there.
Yep.
And by the way, the other thing that we'll do is like I'll use solution and system. And again, I want to be very clear. Tech is not like if you're a tech admin, if you're amazing at you might be a CRM architect. That is not the same thing as being a solution admin or a solution architect.
Right.
Right. Solution and system are product application agnostic.
Yep. And then on the associate level, is that a broader kind of knowledge that you start with, or I guess knowledge isn't the right word, but is that you're doing a broader group of things to try to start to build up that expertise and really find which branch you go up? Or so as an associate, I might not just only be doing database work, for example.
Well, it depends on the size of the organization. I mean, so if we have a database team, and you're a database and you're hired as the database associate, you're probably gonna, the associate level is entry level RevOps. I mean, it's where you start. It's we had a baby level.
Yep.
I mean, one thing that's actually a great idea for companies is to have an associate level, like have associates and have them rotate around. Like if you have multiple teams, have associates rotate around those various teams, so that as they're in year one, you're going to work in 3 or 4 month rotations on these different teams as an associate.
Yeah, I like that. So those are so are you saying the teams would be broken up by the responsibility? So you'd have a database team, you'd have a data science team. Is that?
So ultimately, as like if we go to enterprise, so I don't talk about this in the blog post, but if we go to an enterprise level, then yeah, I mean, if you take a look at, if you go to Salesforce, they've got a design team, they've got a RevOps team, they've got a database team, they've got a data analytics team, they've got multiple tech teams, they've got learning and development, they've got development.
I want to talk about how you'd apply this. So you brought up earlier, if you plan to hire one person, you should plan to hire at least 3. Like, so what does this look like in actuality and application?
So how do you build your RevOps team? How do you start? Okay.
Yep.
So let's talk about the people in quotes of RevOps, right? You can hire somebody, they're an employee.
Mm-hmm.
You can contract somebody, they're fractional.
Yep.
You can outsource.
Okay, what's the difference between contract and outsource?
So contracting with an individual to kind of play the role of an employee.
Gotcha.
So a fractional person.
Okay.
Right. So outsourcing is it's a higher level of it. You're outsourcing it. You're doing it to an organization. You're when you hire fractional, you're looking at things through the lens of very, very much of people.
Mm-hmm.
And you're outsourcing, you're looking at it through the lens of people and process and capability.
Okay.
And from an outsource standpoint, you could be looking at a comprehensive outsource, that is strategy and tactics. It could be outsourcing just, full outsource tactical.
Mm-hmm.
So at the highest level, I would call it full outsource strategic.
Yep.
I could have strategy in place and outsource things fully from a tactical standpoint.
Yep.
I would not do that. If I were going to outsource a part of it, I would outsource the strategic part, which is what I refer to as leadership or advisory.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm going to work with this organization for the higher level, and I'm going to hire the people who are having to do the repetitive work, because that's go on. You're going
Is
to ask
that
a
because
question.
you get, yeah, is that because you get more bang for your buck, so to speak, if you outsource that
I
versus
think you get.
hiring
I
for
think
that
you get a
role?
lot. I think you get a lot more bang for your buck. I think one person can do what one person does, no matter how well connected they are.
Yep.
I'm so like I think fractional roles are the place where I think fractional gets mishired. And I know there's this
Okay.
whole well, so there's a couple things that are going on because of my age. I'm in this cohort of people that I'm seeing this is the age of fractional, and everyone that's saying it's the age of fractional, they're all like in their 40s or 50s, and the reason is they've hit the point where okay, they didn't get the full on high level job, so now they're on their own, and so
Yep.
they're offering fractional services. It's like I have news for everybody. There's nothing new about fractional. I'm not even sure it's any. It's bigger in SaaS right now, but
Right.
but too often it's driven by like why is it big in SaaS? Well, SaaS had a cut. They had to cut
Right.
costs. Oh, so how do we get a VP level person for less than a VP level person? Oh, we'll hire them fractional. Okay, well,
Gotcha.
so the problem that I have with fractional is that someone who's doing fractional is working on multiple, should be working on multiple companies, and you're the whole point of fractional is I'm getting you.
Right.
Look, the reason to hire somebody is when you hire somebody, they go to sleep thinking about you, they wake up thinking about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you hire somebody outsourced, they don't do that. Like I don't
Right.
go to sleep thinking about each of our clients individually, or wake up thinking about each of them individually. But we're in the business of providing that, so I do think about that. I do think about and there's an additional level of capability.
Yep.
So again, like where I think fractional is valuable. I think fractional is best when you're looking at SMB, or which is not high growth. So when you're looking at probably 75 to 500 employees is where I think the sweet spot of fractional is. And
Okay.
you're looking at your growth rate. Your target growth rate is 10 to 25% per year. So you're looking for ongoing incremental. You want somebody to steer the boat, not the
Right.
ship. You want them to be able to navigate when the waters get a little choppy. You don't want them to be freaked out. You want them to understand that. Like their job is to bring balance. I think when you come in, like I think you'd be better off hiring that fractional person as just a straight advisor if you're
Yeah.
looking for them to like you're 50, 100 people and you're trying to drive 45, 50% growth, and like having that person be an advisor where that's what, they built on. I mean, we might be getting a little bit too jargony here, but yeah, I think fractional's an interesting place. I think you need to, when you outsource, I think you need to look at outsource through the lens of outsourcing and really understand what it is. And you need to make sure that the people that you're outsourcing to, so all these quote unquote agencies, they provide theoretical outsource. Yeah,
Right.
RevOps as a service. That is an outsource, but some of the people that are doing that, I think, understand what outsourcing really is. Some of them are like, oh, that's a really cool marketing term. They don't really understand what outsourcing is.
Right.
Right. Or they're just outsourcing it in a way that's different than how we would view outsourcing. But that's like, if you're hiring that firm, when you're interviewing that firm to build your team, you need to interview them through that lens of outsourcing.
Right.
Right. And the outsource could be, leadership, which is kind of that comprehensive strategic, with your team doing most of the tactical, advisory, which is just more of a pure, that's not really outsourcing so much. And then the other element of outsourcing is specialized functions. So there's certain elements where they're highly like if I'm early and our database is really important, it's really critical, I might outsource that tactical function, and I'll hire somebody to administer the broader set to be more of a general. So there are particular areas, like from a marketing standpoint, PPC is a place where I'm a huge fan. If you're spending real money on PPC, you should have somebody that that's what they do.
Yeah.
That is all. So I'm going to outsource that specialized piece, even though I might not be outsourcing all the things or I might even be outsourcing the general marketing function to one group. And I don't think you can manage the marketing process and be, exceptionally exceptional at PPC as an example.
Right.
I think that's where. So kind of your horizontal outsource and your vertical outsource.
Okay. So those are oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say those are the 3 buckets of kind of how you would staff this. But what do those teams look like?
So I think the first RevOps team you have is no RevOps function.
Okay.
Right. It's part of a lot of people's job. That's where you start, right? That's when you're small.
Yeah.
Right. Remember, you have RevOps, whether you have a RevOps team or not.
I was that person for a while.
Well, and if you think about it, so was I. Right. There was a period where, here's I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but it is. Actually, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because if I bring it up, we'll have no choice but to go down it. So I'm going to keep going. So
okay.
Then, and this might sound a little interesting. I think the first place that you begin is you outsource tactical RevOps. There's a set of things that need to be done, and so it's kind of like there's a teensy bit of strategy, but again, how much strategy does a 45-person company with 5 salespeople really need?
Right.
And you know what? Maybe they need it, but now there are exceptions. If you've got a whole bunch of funding, that kind of changes my numbers because you're playing a very, very different game. And they're like, the difficulty is, and we used to have this problem because we used to work with companies that had like 5 salespeople. And the difficulty was they could never quite afford what was needed.
Yeah.
And the approaches and ideas that we had, it's like, well, you only had 5 people to leverage it. So, there's a limited amount of juice that you can get for that. Then I think you go into what I refer to as the hybrid team, which is going to have 1 to 3 full-time employees. So kind of from a functional standpoint, you're viewing it horizontally. Your management of that team is going to be outsourced. So you're outsourcing the management, you're outsourcing leadership. It's like if I have a 3-person team, that's where I might have a fractional.
Yep.
And then my role areas are predominantly generalists, and I'll probably have somebody in tech that's overseeing tech from a broad standpoint.
Yep.
So that's the hybrid team. Then we go to our small RevOps team. That's a team of 3 to 5. You're going to have it's going to be horizontal in focus, right? You're not going to be specialized in sales, operations, marketing operations, et cetera.
Right.
There, your management is probably going to be fractional. Or you might hire a manager. You could potentially hire someone full-time. I actually think if you're going to be running a team on an ongoing basis of 3 to 5 people, that's probably where fractional has its highest value.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Now, here's the thing. I think that there are companies that have more of a need than 3 to 5 people. So having that team, like I think a mid-market company needs more than 3 to 5 people, more than the equivalent of a 3 to 5 person team. Your focus areas are going to be RevOps, so you're beginning to get into real process design on an ongoing basis. You've got your tech element, and then you're outsourcing your specialized needs. Mid-sized team, which is 5 to 8 people in-house. You could still theoretically have a fractional person, but I think if you've got 5 to 8 people, you're really stretching what a fractional person is going to be able to do. I think that's where you need to invest in a director level person, because now you're beginning to introduce a multidisciplinary approach. So you're going to have at least 3 of these functions: design, RevOps, tech, data, and enablement. at least 3 of
Yep.
those 5, and then you might outsource your specialized needs.
Yep.
Your large team is 8 to 15 people. Here, you have a VP from a management standpoint, and you have 5 to 7 of those disciplines clearly identified. Then you get to kind of 4 different hybrids.
Yep.
So hybrid 1 is you have an internal director, but they're not strategy. They're a strong RevOps performer, and they manage the team. You're outsourcing your strategy. So you're outsourcing, you're leveraging a company like Lyft, Jess. You've got a couple of key disciplinary areas that your team has. So again, you probably have those 3 to 5 people.
Yep.
Right. But you're really running the team. Your spend is probably the equivalent of about 4 to 6 people. And you're getting the bang of 8 to 10 people is what I would say likely. Your second hybrid is management fractional.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the same as hybrid 1, but it's a little bit more in-housey because you've got a fractional person. Hybrid 3 is you have a larger internal team, and you're outsourcing the specific element of strategy and design.
Right.
So you're basically leveraging a much higher function.
Mm-hmm.
And then your fourth hybrid is just kind of mixing some full-time, like it begins to get, my point here is you begin to get into a lot of different variations and configurations. And then ultimately you get to an enterprise team of, I would say at that point, you're 16 or more, you're at that enterprise team, and it is a fully cross-functional beyond what this podcast is really shooting to talk
and
to.
that's where you have those subset of teams based on the roles and responsibilities.
So, and we'll lay this out in the show notes, but to bring it home, so at the small business level, you've got no formal RevOps function. At the SMB level, you begin to introduce tactical RevOps into, your tactical outsource into your small team or your hybrid 1.
Mm-hmm.
High growth small, you have a full strategic outsource, or you're looking at hybrid 2. If you're looking at high growth mid-market, you're looking at hybrid 3 or a full strategic outsource.
Yep.
And then mid-market, you're either looking at your large team, which would be in-house, or you're looking at that hybrid 4 where you're bringing in, you're outsourcing kind of the very top and specialized mixing. It almost becomes like staff augmentation.
Yep. Well, you tied that in a nice little bow. No notes. Yeah, I think the breakdown of the roles is really helpful, and like we've been working on this internally for ourselves, like what are our teams and what are our areas of focus, and I think that's something that's important to be thinking about as you're working through building out that function, both for outsource, like if you're outsourcing, do you have these functions at your agency, and how do you approach those functions is something that should be considered. And then kind of what I heard you say is really having a mixture of that, like internal folks with outsourcing, with fractional, making sure you're paying attention to how you're hiring that fractional role is really where you're going to get the most out of your RevOps team.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is if you're going to do RevOps, don't do RevOps partway.
Yeah.
And that's the whole,
absolutely.
Don't hire one person.
Yeah, exactly. All right,
Jess, for 12 days.
12 days.
Just say no to shitty RevOps.
Till next time.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Whether you're at the small business level, SMB level, high growth small, high growth mid-market, or higher, there is a way for you to put your RevOps team together. Take a look at the link in the description for our show notes to get the full breakdown. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug and Jess about building your RevOps team, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on X at Demand Creator or LinkedIn at Lift Enablement. And until next time, just say no to shitty RevOps.